it's Jackie. Today we're going to do a really fun yin sequence that is for hips, so hip openers. Really get the nice stretch in that groin. Really good for the low back, but it can be very strenuous on the knees. So as we go through our How to Prop series, we're going to work with the bolsters, the blankets, squishy blocks. So put on your favorite playlist and enjoy. I love incorporating square pose into my personal practice as well as a lot of my yang style classes, particularly the Vinyasa classes, the Vinyasa fusion classes. It's a great one that really kind of decompresses the back if you do go into the fold. It's a great prep for lotus pose, and it's a really good hip opener. However, if you do have sciatica, this pose can really aggravate that. So always make sure you have the hips elevated, and I will demo how to elevate the hips in this pose. But as we begin, I will show you my full expression of this. Now when we get into our square pose, we're trying to line up the knee with the ankle, getting a nice parallel edge. I like to pick an edge of my mat and try to see if I can get that nice and squared. Make sure this foot stays flexed. Then you'll bring the opposite foot on top of that planted knee. Foot stays flexed as you start to work this knee down towards the heel. Now, here you will begin to notice your dominant side and which one's not so dominant and needs more work. If you're up here, that's fine. If you're completely touching, that's fine. Just think about where you are, how you want to keep this nice and straight and these feet flexed. When you switch, you want to make sure you do the same thing. Now, again, you can really see which side is my dominant side because this knee is way closer to the heel with a lot less effort to do. I can actually use my hands to help push that down, creating a new edge for myself, releasing a little bit if I need some extra kindness, love into this area. So one of the most common ways that we prop for this pose is actually using a block. Placing it underneath the foot, giving the knee something to rest onto, allowing us to find that opening in the hips without putting in too much strenuous work in the thighs and in the knees. You can stay here, or you can start to work on your fold forwards, compressing through that lower back, keeping the neck nice and long, or just letting everything be loosey-goosey. If you can't get this knee down to the ground, bring your blocks in there too. What we're working on is trying to get those hips nice and open, so if we're super tight, you may notice that getting both knees down or even getting one knee down is really difficult. Never be discouraged by that. The point of yin is to find where you are here and now and honor where that is. Really internalize what it is you're feeling. If you're starting to feel those pins and needles, those pushings, that like really kind of hurting tension or stretching, take a modification, take a prop. You can also bring the blanket underneath if you need a little bit more cushion, making this a little bit softer, a little easier. Now, for my people with sciatica, you may need to elevate the hips. It could be something as simple as just holding your blanket, bringing your hips to the edge of the blanket, allowing them to be slightly higher, then finding your square in the legs. This little forward motion may be a little bit easier to help bring this knee down. You can do this with your combination with the blocks as well. Now, when we come into our folds here, you may notice that you start to bellow in when you get ready for the fold. Again, we want to make sure everything stays nice and squared. We can actually use our blocks to help with the fold by bringing the hands to the blocks and helping that guide us out Finding that edge where we keep the spine nice and long, stretching through that low back, giving us something to work towards. Be inching it a little bit further each time. You can bring the forearms down to the mat, rest the head. If you need some support, bring your block down. Now you notice that's a little bit too deep to me because my foot just slid back. So I may actually need 2 blocks if I want to do a little bit of a rest here to keep myself in a much better alignment. If you want to incorporate square into your openings and your stretches, besides doing the folds, this is a great thing to do any of your fun yogi arm movements. You can bring the hands forward, you can bring them up, you can take a Gomukhasana, bring the arms behind the back, hinge. Oh, that's a good crack. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that felt really good. A lot of things you can do here. That's why square is such a fun pose. And let's go. In our yogi squats, before we actually go into the pose, it's very important to remember or to be mindful of what directions our knees are going, as well as what direction our feet are going. In this pose, because it can be very intense on the knees, often twerking them if you're way too tight, you want to make sure that the foot goes in line with the knee to help protect those joints. It makes it a little bit harder to work in, but it's a lot more beneficial for your body. So let's start with my fullest expression of yogi squat. I like to have those feet nice and wide as well as those knees. Chest is resting in. And a little bit of a slouch here, but you notice I'm taking an outward rotation, so both my knees and my toes are going in the same direction. Now, depending on how long I hold this, usually anywhere from 2 minutes to 8 minutes, I will stay here with the hands at heart center, or maybe drop those hands down, take a little bit of a slouch. Sometimes a good sway from side to side, often called bringing water movements into your poses, helps relieve the tension that's being built up. If I wanted a more narrow stance, I would bring my knees in as well as my toes, allowing myself to rest down. Now this brings a lot of compression back here, so there's a couple different ways we can relieve this. Is a full planted foot yogi squat is not in your practice. So first let's come out of it, release some of that tension, and grab a block. A block is going to be one of your favorite props that you're in practice. One of the best ways to use a block is to have it at its highest setting. Bringing it underneath the sacrum and allowing yourself to sit under the block. Maybe adjusting it as needed, and you might want to grab a sturdier one. Sometimes these foam guys are a little bit too light and they kind of compress and lean. And while we're here, you can either stay high on those toes if it's needed, or work on planting those feet. This is a great space where you can play with the opening in the groin and the legs, as well as making sure your knees and toes are going in the right direction. So if you have a more narrow stance, try to make sure you stay with that in the direction of the foot. Maybe play, take those little rotations, start working yourself out a little bit wider. You can relax here on the thighs. Some people like to bring the hands to the ground, drop the head. There's a lot of different variations that you can take while you're on your block. You can also play with the heights and the settings. Your block gives you a couple different heights to work with. So take the opportunity, those minutes, to really play. Find the height that gives you that comfort, that ease, but also allows you to invite in some work. Finding that edge, that fine line between rest, relaxation, and a little bit of effort. Bring that block down. Take it to an even lower setting. Really work on widening through the hip flexors, through the groin. Always remember to breathe here. And eventually, not having your block at all. Now, if even working with the block and it's still a lot in the back of the legs, particularly around the knee, you can take your trick with the blanket. Now, it's not as graceful as what a lot of our other poses are, but it still feels really good. So we will bring them behind the knees, nice and wide, so as you bend and sink, it gives you a little bit of cushion. It looks kind of funny, but it does actually feel pretty good. If I am a little bit super tight, or if I did a lot of leg work and I'm really sore behind the knees, this is actually one of my preferred methods to take. It's one of my preferred methods to take if I'm super, super sore. Wherever you are in your yogi squat, have fun with it. You'll see a lot of folklore where people say, you know, there are cultures where people eat in this pose, where they give birth in this pose, where they live most of their lives in this pose. It's one that's very natural for us as kids. I don't know if any of that is true, but it's on the internet, so go check it out if you want. But let's have fun in the next pose. So Sphinx and Seal are two different poses, but you may see them incorporated within the same time slot. So if you're going to hold the pose for 4 minutes, the teacher may cue you halfway in between the transition either into Seal or down into Sphinx. A lot of times practices will start you off in Sphinx and then have you work up to Seal, or if you're going a little bit more aggressive, a little more assertive, starting in Seal, maybe staying there or working your way back down to Sphinx for a little rest. So I'm going to demo my fullest expressions of both poses. With our Sphinx and Seal, we want to bring the pelvic down to the ground, coming into Sphinx. Feet are together, nice and long. Shoulders over top the elbows. Fingers are spread. Gecko grip, so we're taking a little flexation in the knuckles as you pull the mat towards you, pushing the chest forward. Now I want to work on keeping those feet and knees together. While I'm here, if I find this is a little strenuous, one of the best things to do is bring your legs a little bit wider, giving you a stronger foundation, also releasing some tension in the hips. When we come into Seal from here, you will first pivot the hands towards the corners to plant, push down and lift up. You're creating a much deeper back bend. If you feel any pins and needles, any pinching sensations, any tingling, immediately lower back down. But if we're up here again, we want to keep working those legs together, or if we need that stronger foundation, nice and wide. We can also work those hands up, giving us a greater stretch. If you're like me and you hyperextend in those elbow joints, keep a soft bend there so you stay in control. When we come down, we release and push back up to where we need to go. So in fact, with both of those, and I don't really remember why, but they're great poses to prep for meditation. One of the best ways that we can prop in these is actually using our blanket. You can either leave it a little bit flatter if it feels good, or roll it up like I did. As I push my pelvic onto the blanket, giving myself a little bit more of a cushion here. If you have any kind of sensitivities, this is a great variation for that. If you're in Sphinx and you need more of a chest rest, roll it up a little bit higher, bring the body down, bringing it right underneath that chest line, so those right behind the elbows. That way you have a little bit of support for the chest to rest onto. You can even grab your block. Give the head something to nestle in. Maybe give the chin something to rest on. Whatever variation of that feels good for you. Because we are relaxing here through the lower parts, you could put a little bit too much pressure in the knees, in those pelvic. So it may feel really good to either use your blanket or use a knee pad, bringing them underneath those knees so you have a little bit something easier to rest those legs on. Now when we come into our Seal, you can do a lot of the same things. Again, having yourself that little roll for the pelvic, release and relax a little bit of the belly on, so you have something to help support you as you push up. If you really want to find extra work in these poses, you can use your blocks for that as well. As I bring them to my side, get myself nestled down in first, I can take a higher Sphinx as such, or I can take a higher Seal. Now this is too much strenuous for me, so I may never take this variation. But a lot of times, I do really like to rest here because it relaxes my wrists. Either way, Sphinx is a great way to bring a back bend into your practice without having to do an inversion, having to take anything too strenuous, and working with Seal and playing with your variations and your play from Sphinx into Seal is a great way to kind of judge where your back body is this morning or today or the evening or wherever you're doing your practice. Where you feel like you're getting a little bit too much compression, do you need to take it back a notch? Or does it feel really loose and open and you can take it a step further? When we compress through the lower lumbar and through the mid-back, when we pinch those nerves, you will know if it is too much, and you will know if you can go a little bit further. So really internalize in these positions and take the time to figure them out and to play with them a little bit. Frog pose. I have a love-hate for frog pose. It is a very intense hip opener. It's very, for me, intense pressure on the knees. It's not my favorite, and it's not one that I can easily get into. And half the time, it's not even one that I can do. Which is why propping for this pose is one of my favorites to play with. So before we start with our props, again, I'm going into my fullest expression where I am here today. To get in a frog, a lot of times you'll have people start you off in child's pose. That way you can get the body nice and low. Then first work on bringing those knees much wider so the groin can get close to the floor. Extending those arms nice and long. Then it's flexing and rotating those feet so the toes point out, and then trying to bring those heels in line with the knees. As you push that hip down to the ground, resting the chin or the forehead on the mat. Frog pose is one that you may not hold as long, but you will have a teacher probably cue it for 4 minutes. So if you're in a type of class like that, one of the great things you can do is do half frog. So instead of coming into the full frog, you're going to work your way either down to your Sphinx or down to your crocodile. As you start to bring one knee up to the elbow, flex that foot, start to work that ankle in line with the knee. Take your half frog. This is a very relaxing variation of the frog pose. And then you would switch it on each side. Here you can play with that hip opener without bringing in too much stretch and too much stress. Though for some of us, half frog is not nearly enough work. It feels a little bit too restorative. So you may want to play with your props. One of the favorite times I love to use the big bolster is for frog. Laying it down, working those knees and feet nice and wide, having the flex as I lower the belly onto the bolster. This way I can keep my body up. I get a little bit of stretch in the groin, but it's not too deep, and I can work more on that alignment in the legs, getting those ankles in line with the knees. I can drop the head down. I can bring a block if I wanted to. extend those arms out. The bolster helps make this a little bit more gentle. And if I still want to have that work but not go what I would feel would be more restorative, which is with the half frog, I can take the full frog with the bolster, have that relaxation as well as a little bit of effort. Now if I'm working down to try to get that groin closer to the floor, I may want to use the block instead. Getting those legs in line as I bring the block underneath, letting the booty rest down. Working the chest down to the ground, extending those arms out. Feeling the stretch through the upper body as well as in the groin. If that is too intense for me, I can bring in the other block to place underneath the chest. Again, taking a little bit higher of a position in the body, but not as high as the bolster. I can bring the block underneath the forehead to help keep my neck nice and long if I'm feeling a little sore and cervical. Or even removing the block completely from the groin and maybe working, just being right here, using it to support the arms as I play with getting those hips closer to the ground. Finding that edge and then taking just a step back from it. While we're here, we are bringing a deep compression in the back of the knees. So again, like our other poses, it may feel really good to grab your blanket here. Placing it behind those knees, giving you a little bit of cushion as you spread them nice and wide and start to work yourself down. You can be here. Again, you can incorporate your blocks how you need them. And another option you can work on, especially if you're playing with the transition from child's pose into frog, is tadpole. So, we'll find that child's pose, the arms are out, we bring those knees wider, but instead we kind of keep those toes pointed in as we work those ankles in line with the knee. So I'm not taking the flexation in the foot. This is our tadpole pose, and this is a great alternative for frog as well. So frog is a fun one to play with. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.